Good evening. The March 28th meeting of the Evanston City Council will come to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Suffredin. Councilmember Ravel. Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Hedakaris.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite.
Here.
Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Newsma.
Here.
With 6 members present, we have a quorum and are prepared to do our work. We'll begin with the mayor's public announcements, which begins with a joyous occasion. I want to call up the Reverend Deborah Scott, representing Evanston Own It, to share with us some really exciting news, not only about the remarkable work that they do on an ongoing basis throughout the year, throughout their community, but about the enthusiastic partnership and support they're bringing to the city as well. Pastor, go ahead.
Good evening to Mayor Bliss and the City Council. The citizens of Evanston, we bring greetings from Evanston Own It. I have some of our members here with us on this evening as well. As you know, one of our missions for the Evanston Own It Alliance is to support any endeavors that will strengthen, encourage, build confidence in our youth. And so at this time, we would like to present to the mayor for his summer youth program $8,000, and that will bring our total up to $58,000 since 2015. We really appreciate the work that's being done, and we want to just make sure that the work continues. We also would like to present $1,000 to the Officer and the Gentleman organization. They too are also doing a great work in their mentorship of the young men in the 2nd and 5th wards, and so we are appreciative of their work as well. And so we are here, and on behalf of Evanston Own It, I'd like to present this check, a grand total of $9,000.
Good to see you here. Yes.
You know, when we think about the circumstances that led to the creation of Evanston Own It, and we think about some of the challenges that we're going through these days, it just, I think, brings into relief how critical this organization, this network is, the kind of service that they perform. It's irreplaceable. And so these resources are enormously valuable given the work that we're doing in the Summer Youth Employment Program, given the value of the Officer and Gentleman Program. But the kind of partnership that Evanston Own It provides, I think, is really special and totally irreplaceable. So just an enormous thank you from the council, from the city government, and from the whole community to everything you do. Next is a proclamation that we're presenting to the League of Women Voters. I will just briefly begin to read this proclamation presented on the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters of Evanston. Whereas in the late 19th century and the early 20th century, women in Evanston were active locally and nationally in efforts to improve the lives of women and secure for women the right to vote. And whereas on June 2nd, 1919, the proposed 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution giving women the right to vote was passed by Congress and sent to the states for ratification, and Illinois became the first state to ratify the amendment. And whereas in 1920, activist women formed a national organization, the League of Women Voters, to prepare women to become active in the political sphere. And whereas in 1922, 100 years ago, women in Evanston formed the Evanston chapter of the League of Women Voters, LWVE. And whereas less than a year after its founding, LWVE joined with other groups to present a 3-day citizenship school in Evanston to instruct new women voters on the structure of American government, election laws, and current social and financial topics. And whereas since its founding, LWVE has worked to promote its mission to encourage informed and active participation in government, to increase understanding of public policy issues, to influence public policy through education and advocacy, and to defend democracy. And whereas LWVE continues to work as a political and nonpartisan organization, continues to advocate and take action on issues, and continues to avoid supporting or opposing any political party or political candidate, as all of us up here know well. And whereas LWVE works to fulfill its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and in practice, and whereas every year LWVE identifies issues for study and or action to impact local, state, or national progress, including over recent years affordable housing, health equity, climate action, immigration reform, capital punishment, and many others. And whereas LWVE maintains its commitment to voter engagement and education through voter registration drives, candidate events, and meetings with elected officials, now therefore, I, Daniel, Mayor of the City of Evanston, Illinois, do hereby proclaim March 28, 2020, a day to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters of Evanston and its contributions and commitment over the last century to its ongoing civic action. If the representatives of the League could come forward, I'd love to present this proclamation. And so now I'm doing the really awkward thing of sitting during the standing ovation. Oops. Because I wanted to just also share that the representatives of the League are pointed out that there are many League members who sit on the City Council, and they wanted the council members who are also members of the League, if they would be willing, to join in a photo as we present the proclamation.
I wanted to say a few words.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mayor Biss and council members, for this recognition of our 100th birthday. Actually, it was on this day, March 28th, 1922, down the street that we had our first meeting. So we all wanted to thank you, both those who have gone before us and those who will come after. We will certainly look forward to many long years of continuing our advocacy of issues, our voter education benefits, and finally our civic engagement opportunities for all the citizens of Evanston. So if we could have a round of applause for this great honor, I'd appreciate it.
Mayor Biss, may I make a quick note of the occasion? Yeah. Or about
Councilmember Reed is recognized for an extraordinarily brief comment.
Yeah, I just want to note, yes, I know. I like to play resident historian, and so I will continue that role. I had a lot of time in the clerk's office to look at old records, and I just want to note that Mayor Biss read through a number of historic occasions for women across the nation. One date that was left off is 1892, when women voted for the first time in Evanston in a local election. And so Evanston women were voting long before, a few decades before, women were voting in other. And I have an article here. I'm not going to read any part of it because I'll be brief, but just when the women decided that in the school board election in 1892 that they were going to vote, they went up and just exercised their right, and the men in Evanston showed no opposition, and they were able to march into the polls and vote their will. So I just want to note that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That is a wonderful story. Would the clerk please add Councilmember Nguyen to the roll? And next is City Manager Public Announcements.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. No announcements tonight.
Next is Communications from the City Clerk.
I'll just recognize the public comments in favor of the living room project from Samantha Henley, Patty Capuch, and Christine Somerville.
Thank you. We're now going to go off the printed order of the agenda to accommodate some residents with busy schedules and move directly to HS1, after which we'll do public comment. Would anyone care to make a motion on item HS1?
I will move item HS1, Resolution 17R22, approval of the honorary street name sign designation.
Councilmember Reed moves item HS1. Councilmember Braithwaite seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think as we vote on this, there are a number of members of the family that are here in support, and I don't know, I'm assuming Dr. Logan may speak for them. I would quickly say that the information, the application is in front of us all. It is so wonderful to be able to, give this honor to someone while they're alive, particularly someone with a long history, as Mr. Logan has, to our community. I think the organizations that I'm familiar with, and there's so many, FAM, the Fellowship of African American Males, the basketball league he was co-founder of, that combined sports and education. ECDC was the first community organization that really focused on economic development before we had a real outreach on the west end of the community. Mr. Logan led that effort. So many others. And then, of course, the organization that I have the honor to be a part of, which is the Chessman Club of the North Shore. He's touched so many lives here in the city, he and his extended family. We as a city council couldn't think of a better way to honor him. And I know that the family has a number of activities to celebrate as he approaches his 90th birthday. So without further ado, I'll just have you announce the family and we can move forward with it. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, council member. I'm afraid you're not the only one who wants to say some congratulations and thanks to Mr. Logan for his tremendous service to our whole community. Councilmember Reed is next.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Mr. Logan. We may have met in passing a number of times, but it is your story that precedes you that I've heard about for a long time, and I just feel so honored to, as a young man of color, as a young black man, to be able to grow up in a community with so many heroes that I can look up to that aren't distant folks far away or aren't figures from 300 years ago. They're people who lived that are living now that I can reach out and touch. I'm not going to touch you now because of COVID. But that I could. And one of the stories, I don't think I even heard you tell it. I think it was I was at an officer and gentleman event, and it was about you becoming police chief. And the message of the story was to be prepared. I think when you started as a police officer, you did not have a college degree. And as you were working up through the ranks, you thought to yourself, and I think there was a rule where you didn't have to have a college degree. You did not have to have a college degree to be police chief here in Evanston. And you thought, you had the foresight to say that I better be prepared for the moment and you went and you got yourself a degree, and lo and behold, the moment that we were going to have our first black police chief, the rule came down that you have to have a college degree. And luckily, you were prepared for that moment. And when I heard that story, I was just telling Councilmember Braithwaite about it the other day. It's something that really stuck with me. And it's a lesson that I've tried to apply in many areas of my life, to be prepared for the things that are going to come at you, even if you don't expect them, or even if you are hoping and wishing that they don't. Be prepared. And so, thank you. Thank you for the lessons that you teach people throughout this community.
Is there any further discussion? I'll just quickly add my thanks, I think it's really just an example of what public service is supposed to be. The marriage of all those years given to the city government, to the police department, to the community in that way, with all of the numerous other community organizations that you played a leadership role in, all the different ways to touch people, the understanding that it's not enough to serve in one way, that it's not enough to be a role model in one way, that someone with the talents that you have and the heart that you have has the ability and then the responsibility to find all these different ways to give. And you just spent so many years giving so much to this community. I just feel enormously in debt to you. I know that this whole council feels that way. And we hope that this honorary street sign, it's a token, but we hope it's a token that shows the depth of our love and our appreciation and the way in which we seek to use you as an example about how we can ourselves give back to our community. So thank you and congratulations, and I would love it if anyone from the Logan family wanted to step forward and say some words.
Greetings, you all. I'm going to allow the man to speak for himself. I just want to say on behalf of the family, we are beyond honored and touched by this privilege. I mean, surely we're biased and we believe he's worth it. But believe it or not, he was concerned about the vote passing. So we don't take anything for granted. But regardless of that, nonetheless, the fact that it's happening, and just on behalf of the family, this has been a family event, a family moment. This is a community event and a community moment. And as I often say, that from a personal standpoint, I say it on behalf of our family, that I am because we are, and because we all are, therefore I am. And that goes for our family. I mean, our family, we are simply a byproduct of the community in which we come from. And us children, we're simply a byproduct of our parents and our elders and our ancestors. So we just want to thank you all tremendously for this honor, and we hope that the city can join us in the celebration of, we're calling it celebrating 90 years of William Bill Logan Jr. And on June 25th at the Noise Cultural Arts Center, we're going to have a gallery that kicks off a weekend of celebration for him. And there'll be a display that will remain for a number of weeks. And then on Saturday, June 25th, we'll have a community celebration at Robert Crown in honor of a fundraiser to raise money for the Logan Scholarship Family Fund. So we are trying to raise $1 million for the sake of providing scholarships to young people who are worthy. And lastly, on Sunday at 2 o'clock, hopefully, on the 26th, we'll have a street naming on McDaniel Avenue and Nathaniel on the corner in which we live. So thank you all, and Councilmember Braithwaite, thank you for the role that you've played in this. You've been an incredible support to our family beyond just this event and this moment. So thank you, and thank you all. And anyone else?
Hi, thank you so much. I think Gilo said everything. We really appreciate it. We know our dad is a wonderful person, so we're really glad that you see that he's a wonderful person as well. So thank you so much. And anybody else? Yeah? Oh, okay. So thank you. We're very honored. So we really appreciate it very much. Thank you. And thank you to our cousins that are watching. We have a lot of cousins that are watching, so thank you to our cousins in California
Around the
and whatnot.
country.
Yes, thank you.
So just in case this passed, he made a few comments he would like to share with you all.
Well, listen, if you want us to vote first and then have him come up, so there's no doubt, we are happy to follow that sequence.
Whatever the protocol is, we want to honor that.
Well, you know what? Let us remove all doubt. Let me ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris,
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly,
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite,
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen, Councilmember Nusma.
Aye. With 7 voting in favor and none, of course, voting against, Resolution 17-R-22 passes. Congratulations, thank you, and we would be honored to hear from Chief Logan.
Thank you.
Take your mask off. Take your mask off.
Okay. Okay, thank you. From the depths of my heart, I thank everyone who was part of giving me the distinguished honor and privilege to have an honorary street named after me. I am elated, humbled, and my heart is filled with joy to be recognized like this by my community. My life has been a journey with many challenges and life lessons acquired along the way, and this honor makes it all worthwhile. For me, community service is an important part of my life, as is the feeling that gives me to help other people. The most valuable thing that I have learned to serve God by serving humanity, and to serve humanity by serving my community that has made me who and what I am. I want to thank my dear parents, Rose Johnson and William Logan, who always taught me to stand up for what is right. They taught me about the importance of giving back. I always saw how involved my dad was in the community and how much an important part social justice was to his life. My father was my role model. This would not be complete if I did not thank my wonderful family, many whom you see here today. And I want to give a very special recognition to the most wonderful woman that I love so much, my beloved wife, Marcia, and the 5 decades of support she gave me in all of my efforts. Without her, I would not be all that I am today. To all my ancestors, I say thank you for paving the way for me to be who I am today. This honor is truly something I hope my community and future generations of my family will be proud of, particularly my 3 children and my 3 grandsons, Ulai, Olu, and Ali. In closing, I share with you a quote my dad used to say to me: "There's a destiny that makes us brothers. None goes away alone. What we give into the lives of others comes back into our own." To you, the entire City Council, and the City of Evanston, from the center of my heart, I say thank you, thank you, thank you. May God continue to bless Evanston, and may God bless you, and peace to you all. Thank you. Okay. Okay. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Huh? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Again, thank you all, council, to the city of Evanston, to our family outside of Evanston, to everyone who's here today, and everyone in support. We thank you all very much.
Thank you for everything you've done for this community. This brings us to public comment. This evening, everyone will be given 3 minutes to speak in public comment. As usual, we begin with those who are giving public comment in person, starting with Eric Passett.
Hi, my name is I'm Eric Passett. I'm the owner of North Shore Apartments and Condos, and I'm also a resident of the 4th Ward. I actually live at 1400 block of Oak Street. And I actually talked to the alderman before the meeting, and I couldn't attend the, how should I say it, the meeting about the Margarita Inn. So I'm here to adamantly oppose it. I will say before I state I already stated my opinion, but as a person, I feel like I do a lot to try to help people who are less fortunate than myself. I don't want to go into other organizations, but I do a lot as a person to help people. I feel like, and as a community, I feel like we do an awful lot. You know, we have a lot of organizations in our area where we do help people that are less fortunate than ourselves. And my strong objection to this is in downtown Evanston, we already have about 3 or 4. We have 2 churches that provide homeless shelter to people overnight, and we have a couple other places where, let's say, people less fortunate than maybe some other people, like let's say the YMCA, and there's some other places that have places there. And all I can say is, and up to this point, we probably but since the pandemic, I think it's increased the amount of homeless people in the area. No question about that, you know. And again, I try to do whatever I can to help people. And as an organization of North Shore Apartments and Condos, I actually talked to one of the representatives from Connections for the Homeless the other day, and I told her my feelings, and I said it's not that I don't want to help, because I do try to help. We do place a lot of their clients in some of our buildings, so I will preface that. What I object to is the concentration of it in downtown Evanston. I live literally right next to the Rose Garden. We have a whole bunch of homeless people that hang out in the Rose Garden. Now, I know for a fact those are not people from the Margarita Inn. I can tell you that. However, you know, if you go to, I talked to my wife who goes to the Target in downtown Evanston. People are constantly getting accosted for money, and it's just, as a community, I think we do more than enough. And what I don't think is being represented fully here is that, like I said, as a community, if you were to talk to Connections for the Homeless, Catholic Charities, all the other organizations.
15 seconds.
Okay, we have quite a few residents already in Evanston as a whole that are part of these programs. Why does Evanston have to bear the whole burden? And that's what and especially in downtown Evanston. You know, I mean, I can tell you that some of the residents who live in the area, in the immediate area, don't feel comfortable. So I've been enough said, but thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Yvonne Smith.
Good evening, Mayor Biss and the Evanston City Council. I'm here speaking on behalf of residents of Evanston community, parishioners at St. Nicholas Catholic Church and St. Luke's Episcopal Church. Both congregations are members of the United Power for Action and Justice. United Power is an organization of 30 faith-based nonprofit community organizations in Cook County. We enthusiastically support the proposals set forth by Ann Rainey, the Chief Executive Officer of Turning Point Behavioral Health Care, to establish a living room in Evanston. United Power has been advocating for several years to improve mental health services in our community. Diversion of people in mental health crises from jail has been a focus of our efforts for several years, and doing this through advocating for crisis intervention team training with Evanston, Skokie, and even Rogers Park police departments, and supporting an alternative to hospital emergency rooms when people are in crisis. Turning Point Behavioral Health provides excellent and expert, affordable, and compassionate mental health care for adults and families. The living room model, which has been employed, has proven to provide calming and a supportive environment for persons in crisis as an alternative to hospitalization. Through its partnership with Impact Behavioral Health, Trilogy Behavioral Health, Peer Services, and Amita St. Francis Hospital, support for substance abuse disorders as well as employment assistance will be readily available. Wraparound services are critical for helping folks to maintain stability. We know that many in our community experiencing homelessness have mental health issues and are unable to break the cycle of helplessness and hopelessness. Families of loved one in crisis often don't know where to take people when they need help. Calling 911 is not always the best answer. The living room will provide a place where they can bring their loved ones, receive appropriate psychiatric services. Data also shows that persons who visit a living room have much better outcomes than going to the emergency room. We have an obligation as people of faith to implement proven alternatives to correctly steer the trajectory of the lives of people in crisis. It is also cost-effective to provide sound and trauma-informed alternatives to a hospital emergency room, to a jail cell, or living on the street.
15 seconds.
We strongly encourage the City Council to approve and fund the living room in Evanston through ARPA funds as are outlined in the memorandum created by the City of Evanston. I also want to acknowledge that we have at least 10 individuals here who are from St. Nicholas Catholic Church and St. Luke's Parish here in Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Chris Dillow.
Hi, thank you for your time. This is in regards to Connections for the Homeless application for use of the Margarita Inn. I want to start by thanking Mayor Biss for an email today recognizing or supporting the having Connections for the Homeless apply and go through a public, I want to make sure I get this right, public, open, and community-driven process to make this important decision, which it absolutely is. I also want to express my appreciation for Councilmember Reed's earlier conversation about shutting off the residents' water, demanding and requiring hard data as to what it means right now and what it means in the future, because that's also very applicable to how we need to think about the Margarita Inn. It's still troubling, though, that based on a zoning technicality, we were just about to make the Margarita Inn a permanent homeless shelter. Because the Margarita Inn had not continued with their zoning requirement, we are now in the position that we're in. And it could be very different. Right now, the largest shelter in Evanston, what would be the largest shelter in Evanston against any special use criteria without community or council input and with just an administrative rubber stamp. So I would just like to take a couple minutes to clarify what I believe are at best uninformed assumptions and at worst false narratives allowed to perpetuate. Connections for the Homeless Shelter at the Margarita Inn is not a rooming house. Connections Homeless Shelter qualifies under a higher special use threshold of transitional housing, which would, by law, require better and greater protections and oversight for the shelter's residents and the community. Connections Homeless Shelter at the Margarita Inn is a homeless shelter. Connections Homeless Shelter houses the same residents with the same needs as any homeless shelter in Evanston or anywhere else. that particular population has a high rate of mental health and addiction services, or requires that. Connections for the Homeless current use of the Margarita Inn is as an out-of-compliance homeless shelter enabled by Evanston's continued non-enforcement of its own regulations. I do not believe this city is neutral. The city is setting the table, per 4th Ward Alderman Newsma's comments, to be out-of-compliance homeless shelter, advising and cooperating with the Connections to support their application as a rooming house. This is additionally apparent as they continue to state that Connections homeless shelter qualifies as a rooming house. Connections is not a victim of bureaucracy. Connections is being advised by the city and their attorneys for expediency in whatever fiscal relationship exists. But Connections could have chosen to be a better neighbor, to apply as a shelter with amendments, option 3 from St. Mark's, and basically just be above board.
15 seconds.
Thank you. Last thing I'll say then is any action is not better than no action, and any opposition is not just NIMBY. While many recent articles pit the neighbors' concerns versus transparency versus the goals of Connections, this is a lazy and emotional plea and does not supersede a real study. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. This concludes the in-person portion of public comment. We now move on to the online commenters. We'll begin with Kate Harris, who will be followed by Mike Vasilko, and then Ibrahim Shihadeh. Oh, sorry, we may be having a technical issue here. Hold on.
I put it on blank because there was stuff popping up during the previous event. I'm sorry.
Bear with us one moment as we reinvigorate our.
I'm restarting this.
Okay. Bear with us one moment. We'll be available momentarily. Again, when we return, the first speakers will be Kate Harris, followed by Mike Vasilko, and then Ibrahim Shihadeh.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask that I know we have an order that was decided. I did not realize. I keep missing the executive session that's slipped in there. Would it make sense for us to take care of SP2 before going into executive session, given that there are a number of folks here specifically on that item?
That request is noted. We're ready to go back to public comment, and we'll return to that afterwards. So we now go to the online public commenters, beginning with Kate Harris, followed by Mike Vasilko, and then Ibrahim Shihadeh. Is Kate there? All right, it seems as though Kate is not there, so we'll then move on to Mike Vasilko, who will be followed by Ibrahim Shihadeh, and then Cindy Castro.
Thank you very much. My first two comments are related to the bills list, that although it was passed in APW, I still like to make two comments regarding it. One is there's a line item for the city manager's office, account number 61055, where the city manager hired temporary employees for a cost of roughly $6,400. The city manager, or the interim city manager, I should say, acknowledged during APW that she did not get approval from Human Resources to hire temporary employees. I bring this up because you may recall a year or so ago when Councilmember Reed was the city clerk, he hired a temporary employee, a student, who did the work but was not paid $2,000 because the city council said that the clerk did not get HR approval to hire that person in a temporary fashion. So there's a double standard. I do think that the student who did the work at the time should be paid. And I think there should be a clear, going forward, maybe there should be a clear rule regarding this. But For the time being, that student should be paid, and that issue should come back to the council. I also like to question insurance fund account number 17424. There was an invoice from a company, an attorney firm, I believe, called Rock, Fusco, and Connolly LLC, in a case labeled Sanchez versus the Village of Wheeling, where somehow the city of Evanston is paying that firm roughly $85,000. I'd like to know what that's for, since it seems to be a case dealing with the Village of Wheeling. So I don't know how Evanston is involved in that. So I'd like somebody to explain that. It's $85,000. I don't know why we're paying it. The third item is item A2 on the agenda. I just want to applaud the fact that even though I always argue about buying vehicles, in this case, the city bought an electric vehicle, a van, which, although it costs more, will save money in the long run. So
15
I applaud
seconds.
that purchase. And lastly, item A14 for the zero emissions work document that is being presented to be placed on file. You shouldn't place it on file. You should accept it and then designate a date certain when you can start talking about it in council, because you're already behind schedule if you're trying to get this done by 2035. There's a lot of work to be done, and there should be regular city council meetings devoted to this climate matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ibrahim Shihade, who will be followed by Cindy Castro, and then Christine Somerville. Looks like Ibrahim may not be in the Zoom, so we'll move on to Cindy Castro, who will be followed by Christine Somerville, and then John Cleve.
Good evening, Mayor Biss, City Manager, and members of the City Council. My name is Cindy Castro. I am the manager of the Outpatient Behavioral Health Clinic at Amita St. Francis, and also one of the co-chairs of the Mental Health Task Force of Evanston. I want to start off by thanking many of you of being engaged and part of very important conversations around mental health needs of this community. Even thanking those of you that dedicated your time to attend tours of the programs and brainstorming what it would mean to the Evanston community to have a living room program. Evanston does have many resources, but there are also many gaps that still need to be addressed. One of them is having an option to going somewhere else besides the emergency room when they are experiencing a mental health crisis. The emergency room is sometimes not the best option for some individuals that are experiencing a mental health crisis, as this can mean so many things, and it does not necessarily mean that they're at risk of harming themselves or others, something that is more appropriate for an emergency room. The living room will provide immediate support, outlining a plan, and being able to get connected with any other agency or resource that they need. As you can see in the outline provided on this program, approving the living room will not only bring one program to the residents, but also build on more collaborations that will only strengthen the support that anyone can receive. Mental has and continues to increase, and despite this increase, there are still not enough services available. The living room is a crucial and needed resource that right now residents do not have. I am here expressing my full support for this program and cannot wait to collaborate and expand on much needed services for residents, and hope that you can also take that positive step today. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Christine Somerville, who will be followed by John Cleve.
Good evening, Mayor Biss and City Council members. I am Director of Programs at NAMI, Cook County North Suburban, and also co-chair of the Mental Health Task Force of Evanston. Evanston is the most active of our communities participating in our peer-facilitated mental health support and education programs. We have witnessed the escalation of mental health needs and diminishing availability of help for those in crisis. There are 23 living room facilities across Illinois currently that provide a safe haven for individuals can go to avoid the impersonal and sometimes frightening experience in ER departments and with law enforcement. Turning Point has provided such a place in Skokie and has the experience to bring this to Evanston. So I am here tonight to support the allocation of ARPA funds for a living room in Evanston and for Turning Point to be engaged in developing the space and programs. We have partnered with Turning Point for several years, and we are committed to continuing at the Evanston location. We hope the city will become a model for mitigating mental health crises, beginning with the living room, and for addressing prevention and wraparound mental health services as the time goes by. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your commitment to this.
Thank you. The next speaker is John Cleve.
Yes, hello. Well, thank you for giving me a chance to speak to all of you. I'm a resident of the 4th Ward who lives 3 doors away from the Marguerite Inn. I'm here to speak to the Connections for the Homeless desire to make the facility permanent. First, I applaud Connections' mission to address a serious problem in the city and the good it's trying to do. I don't question their intent whatsoever. But I do question whether they have the manpower and expertise needed to manage a facility that size, given the population they're overseeing. The past 2 years suggest that it doesn't. There's been hundreds of documented police and fire EMT calls to the facility, several drug overdoses, a death, battery, a gun possession, and many reports of verbal abuse, open alcohol and drug consumption, loud parties, and so on. You can contrast that with the operation of the YMCA, which is also 3 doors away from me, which has been largely problem-free because they're managed well. A 2015 HUD study found that half of the 500K homeless people in the U.S. have mental health issues, and 25% have severe mental health issues. Yet Connections' website shows it has no licensed psychologists on staff. Their handbook for the facility says that alcohol consumption is allowed in the rooms, that it won't consider the legal history of applicants when choosing whether to admit them, and it won't interfere with the resident when the resident's outside of the property. They also give a 4-strike rule that gives them plenty of opportunities to cause mischief before any proceedings to remove them can begin. And tenant rights may bar Connections from removing long-term residences who are causing problems. So I'm asking council members to consider the outcome if Connections fails to provide adequate oversight. It'll drain police, fire resources, lower the quality of life in the neighborhood, and depress the property values of 4th Ward residents. I don't question the goodness of Connections' mission. I question their capacity to pull it off successfully. And as a nearby property owner, this concerns me. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the people who signed up to give public comment verbally. The 2 people who were called on and did not seem to be in the Zoom at the time were Kate Harris and Ibrahim Shihadeh. Is either Kate Harris or Ibrahim Shihadeh in the Zoom at this time? It looks like they are not, and so that concludes public comment. I heard the request from Councilmember Reed to change the order of the agenda. I'm going to move forward with the agenda as printed for a couple of reasons. First of all, it was printed and noticed and done, I think, for good reason, but also because I was just informed that the version of the partnership agreement that initially was posted online in the packet for SP2 was not an up-to-date version, and so I want us to go into executive session just to give a little bit of extra time for folks who may want to look at the updated partnership agreement in the packet for SP2, which is now online, the time to do so. So with that, Councilmember Newsma is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding personnel and the purchase or use of real property. These agenda items are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session and are enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act as set forth in 5 ILCS 120/2A. Sections C1 and C5.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Newsma moves that we resolve into an executive session. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Burns? Aye. Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Heracles?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite? Aye. Councilmember Wynn? Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
With 7 members voting aye and none voting nay, the motion passes. And at exactly 7:30 p.m., The City Council resolves into an executive session to begin immediately in the council member library, after which we will return here and continue with our agenda as swiftly as possible. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Good evening. Thank you for your patience. At 9:49 p.m., the Evanston City Council will come back to order. The next
Recording
item,
in progress.
The next item on our agenda is item SP1. Is there a motion on item SP1?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Wynn moves item SP1. Is there a second? Councilmember Burns seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Heracles.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Aye. Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Wynn. Aye. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor, none voting against, Resolution 25-R-22 is passed. This brings us now, with appreciation to the patience of the gallery, to item SP2. Is there a motion on item SP2?
I move item SP2, approval of ARPA funds for a living room in Evanston to provide immediate care to Evanstonians in mental health crisis.
Councilmember Reed moves item SP2. Councilmember Wynn seconds. There's any discussion. We begin with Councilmember Reed.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was just remembering that you said there was a change to this that was supposed to be sent to us. I don't remember.
Council members, it was a typo that was changed in the agreement, and it was re-uploaded to the link in the packet. So you should have the most updated version.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was changed? Because we didn't really have any time to look at the difference.
I think the law department missed a clause with the party name. It was the wrong party name, and the party name was changed.
Oh, so nothing
Yeah.
substantive?
No.
Okay.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
I just have to admit, I did not have a chance to read through this. I think the only 2 questions, and who's the staff person working on this?
It was me
Okay,
and Allison Lepsinger.
okay, thank you. So are we, I think I asked these questions before, are we prioritizing Evanston residents in terms of who gets access? And then my other question, once it's operational, is there a plan in terms of managing what takes place outside of the location? And so I'm going to specifically use the examples of what we see at the park on Main and Ridge, and I think we all have experienced headaches and phone calls. So what does that plan look like? So Evanston residents prioritizing, and then how do you manage the behavior outside of the facility when the weather's warm?
Yeah, thank you. I think we have with us Ann Rainey, the CEO of Turning Point, who can speak to that not only prospectively, but also from the experience of having run an analogous facility in Skokie for some time.
I have. Thank you for the questions. I'm not sure, because we'll be in a different location, and a location that is separate from our Turning Point facility. Right now, our Turning Point facility in Skokie contains our living room. But in 10 years, we've never had any difficulty with any kinds of occurrences outside of our building or adjacent to our building. We haven't talked with Amita St. Francis about security per se, but we have not needed any sort of outside support for altercations or difficulties or disturbances that have happened outside of the building.
And I would point out that one critical difference between what's being proposed here and the facility near Main and Ridge is this is not a residential program, and I think it's important for us to take pains to separate it from residential services, which may be very important and may be critical in a different context, but are not what we're talking about providing here.
That's a great point. I mean, this is by no means a shelter. This is a drop-in center. The hours are from noon to 8, and we've gotten pretty good at closing at 8 o'clock in our Skokie facility. That is related to just helping people prepare for closure and to leave and to know that they can return the next day. And if they need to be somewhere in between, we'll help them find that place.
Okay.
I have to say that I didn't listen to every word of your question, so did I answer it?
So the other piece was just prioritizing, to the best of our degree, Evanston residents. I mean, we have done extremely well in terms of creating safe places for our homeless and for that population. And I think we're at a very interesting tipping point in terms of residents and balancing all the important issues that come with that. And so I just wanted to make sure that there's a priority for Evanston residents, that we're not inviting additional people from outside of our community, particularly when we're struggling with resources, our police department, et cetera. So I said that I wanted to visit this place, and I own it, that it came up without me prioritizing that. So I would love to be able to just get your card and be able to see what it looks like in full operation.
You're
to
welcome
best
to come.
understand and be able to answer questions
Sure.
when I'm asked by my residents.
Thank you for that question. I'm sorry. A couple things. One is that we'll design the program with the community input, and so that will begin even geographically with who's living around the bungalow, as we are now calling it, and trying to explain it and to talk about its availability. That will extend out to other Evanston organizations and Evanston leaders so that people really know where to come. The other thing that I noticed tonight was I was looking at some statistics for the use of the Skokie living room, and in the period between July 1st and today, more Evanston residents got to our Skokie living room than Skokie residents. So there's kind of an interesting, I think, mutual awareness, and when Evanston residents know that there's a place here for them, I imagine that that's where they'll come.
And so you are speaking to the concern because we are in such close proximity to Chicago. I don't see anyone from Wilmette or Winnetka or Kenilworth coming down, but we do have a tendency to attract residents from Chicago who like to utilize our resources as well. So
Right.
Thank you for addressing the questions.
No one who has not yet spoken is asking to speak, so we'll go back to Councilmember Reed, who has almost all of his time left.
I just want to note that this is an 8th ward, and so while I've discussed this at a ward meeting, I'd love to invite you all to actually come to a ward meeting. We can schedule that offline. I'll just let you know we have one on this Thursday at 6 p.m. For all 8th warders. Not going to try to squeeze, unless you are available, but we can figure that out separately.
Sure.
But certainly really in support of this. I want to make sure that the two council members who really led on this for a long time, I got an opportunity to go visit the facility, but Councilmember Revelle, who is absent today, and Councilmember Fleming, or former Councilmember Fleming, were two folks who worked on this for a long time. Mayor Biss, I know you've certainly been involved in this for a long time, but I just want to give a shout out to those two folks.
I would love to come to your meeting. I was a proud member of the 8th Ward for about 15 years.
You were the council member for 30 years, right?
No. But having my name in the 8th Ward was very interesting. No, I'd love to come.
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
Councilmember Burns.
A quick question is, did we ever find out if the land next to the site is owned by St. Francis or not?
Yeah, we did. It's owned by the daycare.
Can you talk a little bit about what the lease agreement, I know it's not signed yet, but what Amita will charge?
So we're still looking into that. We made it pretty clear that we would be looking at a really de minimis lease agreement with de minimis payment. We talked about a $1 lease agreement. Their legal department's still looking at that, and also looking at which is the best entity to be the lessee on that, whether it's Turning Point or the city turning it over to Turning Point within a year.
But you anticipate they'll be agreeable to it? They're just seeing if.
Yeah, it seemed from all indications that everything was in the works. It just wasn't completed by today's council meeting.
And then how much space is there? I know during renovation, saw in the packet that as an example, walls could be moved around, et cetera. But do we have a sense of how much, what the space needs will be and how it will be kind of converted to support the new use?
Having gotten to walk around, I think, I was explaining this earlier tonight, I think the wonderful thing about the space is it feels the way a living room is supposed to feel. So it's a house, and it's contained, and it's discreet. But there are two pieces that we haven't included in our Skokie living room, and that is staffing space for peer services and for impact behavioral health partners. So I don't know, because I don't know anything about architects' plans as to what we can squeeze out of that space, but we're hoping to be providing continuous services from the three organizations all the time that we're open.
Okay. Because visiting, I can't recall what location it was now, but it was a smaller location. I want to say it was in Northfield, maybe. Does that sound right? Mm-hmm. Are we looking at more of a site like that size as far as the usable space? Because that was very different than the other one that I went to, the larger one, where there seems like there'd be a lot of space to, even if the location in Skokie is a pretty big space. So, it seems like it can fit more people at once, and you could have people waiting in the cafeteria area while others are meeting, with a case manager or a peer. Will we have that same opportunity in this space, or will it be more like what we saw in Northfield?
Well, I'm not sure what you saw in Northfield, because I wasn't there, but...
What I saw in Northfield was like there was a small eating area, there was a small area where I think intake was done, and maybe an office, and then that was it. But everything was real small. It didn't seem like it could take more than one or two, maybe three people at a time, depending on what's happening. Right? It didn't feel like a space where you could say, okay, you five folks, if you would sit here in the cafeteria, enjoy yourself, and then we'll take two over here. And it seemed like a much smaller space where if it got too crowded, you'd almost have to reschedule for later, which isn't terrible, but if somebody is going through crisis, you want to try to keep them there as long as possible. So I'm just trying to get a sense of how this space can be used.
That's right. But when we saw it, I think it naturally has a living room, a dining room, a kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and then there's a bathroom in the middle. The attic was beautiful and kind of scary. I thought it was a good nap room. I didn't go to the basement, but I don't know what is going on down there. But, I think it feels like there are ways that we can make that very homey and hospitable. I will just own up to the fact that I've been kind of lobbying Cindy and others at St. Francis about whether we could ever sneak into the professional building to have some groups maybe, because I think a wonderful outgrowth of our living room program would be some groups for families of people with mental illness or people who might have been treated in the emergency department and then want to follow up with some sort of conversations. And NAMI has talked with us about that too. So, but it's going to really encompass a lot of wonderful services, even the bungalow itself.
I'd love to tour the space as soon as possible just to get a sense of what that capacity looks like. So All right, that's all. Thank you. Oh, and but very supportive of this. I mean,
Thank you.
we've brought this up before, and I'm extremely supportive. I toured a few of the living rooms. I named a few a moment ago, but 100% in support. Thank you.
Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very supportive as well. I want to address the problem of long-term funding. Once we get this set up, how are we going to ensure that this remains operational into the future?
Okay. Well, a couple thoughts. I mean, one is that I hope that our value to the community will be demonstrated sufficiently in a first year of operation that we can maybe look for funding from the community, not the city of Evanston per se, but from other providers and organizations and institutions who may benefit from decreased numbers of people who don't belong in emergency departments and things of that nature. I also have the opportunity at the end of 2023, our living room contracts in the state of Illinois will be up for renewal. And I've already talked to our contract manager for the Department of Mental Health about my hope that we might have a living room in Evanston and the hope that we could have a line item for that, because that's how we're funded in Skokie.
Is that the kind of thing that having a lobbyist work for the city of Evanston might be able to help with?
I think everybody who can vouch for our usefulness and efficiency could help.
Thanks.
Kelly.
I just want to note, too, if it's helpful to the council, the conversations that we've had, Mayor Biss and I and Ann and Pablo, and with Pablo at St. Francis and former Councilmember Fleming and Councilmember Revelle, is that the hospitals, the local hospitals, are really interested to see how this works, too, because the idea is to alleviate their emergency rooms with matters that are not really emergency room related. And I call this urgent care for the mind. And that's how I think of this project.
Good. May I use that?
You may use it.
Okay.
Yes. I'm gonna copyright it tomorrow, though.
Okay.
But
I'll use it tonight.
So I do, I don't want to go too far in presuming, but I think if this is a significant cost savings to our area hospitals, they should be very motivated to make sure this project succeeds beyond next year.
Yeah, and I could not agree more with that. And the only other sort of third leg of the stool, but in addition to the hospitals in the state, is the county, where we have, I think, I've spoken directly with President Preckwinkle about this project. She has strong enthusiasm for it. I think we have a real opportunity there. Again, nothing is done until it's done, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Aye. Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen? Aye. Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 8 members voting in favor and none voting against, SB2 passes.
It was worth the wait.
Yeah. On a personal note, I just want to say thank you. I think this is very important for our community, and I want to thank everyone in the community, our nonprofit partners, many of whom are represented here and some are not, for their significant amount of time. I appreciate Councilmember Reed shouting out Councilmember Revelle and former Councilmember Fleming. And I also just want to thank Sarah and Kelly and Allison, who's here with Valerie Roach's first visit to council, I believe. So thanks to all of you for the time you put into this. I think it's going to really pay off for our community. This brings us to the consent agenda. Does anyone have items they would like to remove from the consent agenda?
Could you remove A18, please?
A18?
P2?
You said A2?
Yeah.
Okay, A2.
No, you said She said P2.
Oh, sorry.
Mayor Biss, I believe Councilmember Kelly said P2. P is in Paul.
I'm fixing that, I'm sorry. Correct. So now I have A18 and P2.
Is Mike Rivera still here by any chance?
Everyone may be available online still.
And if he's not, don't like bother the man now. So if he's not, it's fine. But
So I have items A18 and P2. Anything else? Going once? Going twice?
I'd also like to pull off item A21.
Item A21.
And I'll pull it off if Mike is Mike on the phone already?
Yeah, everybody's on.
Okay. I'll just do A11 as well. Or I'm
All right, so I have items A11, A18, A21, and P2. Is there anything else? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move the consent agenda minus those several items.
Is there a second?
I second.
Councilmember Nusma moves the consent agenda save for items A11, A18, A21, and P2. Councilmember Hadakaris seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Supperton?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Wynn? Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the consent agenda save for items A11, A18, A21, and P2 passes. This brings us now to item A11. Is there a motion on item A11?
I move item A11.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves item A11. Councilmember Nusma seconds. Is there any discussion?
Yes. Mr. Rivera.
Councilmember Reed.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Mike Rivera, are you on? Mr. Rivera?
I am on. I am on.
Hi, Mike. Sorry for the late hour. Quick few questions about this. So we're adding 28, I'm sorry, are these new parking stations?
These are 28 new parking pay box stations. 13 are going to be for the continued lakefront parking program, and then the other are going to be for replacing single space meters along the Maine and Chicago corridor.
Great. So 13 new along the lakefront. What is the revenue that we anticipate bringing in from those 13 meters?
From these 13 new meters, we're looking at approximately $250,000 for this year's lakefront and the areas that we're going to be adding.
Okay, and currently we aren't charging for Evanston residents? For
the lakefront, I couldn't tell you. Oh, for the beach parking, if you have a paid wheel tax, we currently do not charge you. That is correct.
Okay, and even with that, we're looking at $200,000 from the lakefront parking stations.
That's correct, and that estimate was extrapolated from data that we received from the revenue that we made last year in the 2021 fall season of lakefront parking.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Rivera. I just wanted to get that on the record. We recently made the beaches free for all Evanston residents. That we saw a potential loss of about $700,000 annually. We'll approve this now, but I do think it makes smart fiscal sense for us to move toward charging Evanston residents for parking at the lakefront, since we have made access to the beach free at this point. And so, that could bring in the revenue that we're foregoing by charging access to the lake itself. That's it.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed? Councilmember Sepperton?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hedek-Garis?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Nguyen? Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, item A11 passes. This brings us now to item A18. Is there a motion on item A18? Councilmember Sufferton?
Well, I'm going to abstain because this is my alley, so I would rather not make the motion.
No, I will move denial. No, I will move ordinance 22022 to approve construction of a local improvement known as Special Assessment Number 1527.
I'll second.
Councilmember Reed moves item A18. Councilmember Newsma seconds. And now Councilmember Sufferton?
Yeah, I intend to abstain on this, even though my wife and I are paying our full fair share of this. But out of an abundance of caution, after consulting with Nick Cummings, I am going to abstain.
Is there any further discussion on item A18? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton?
I abstain.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hedek-Garis?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Nguyen? Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
With 7 voting in favor, none voting against, and 1 abstention, item A18 passes. This brings us to item A21. Would someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move item A21, approval of a contract with Drexwood Partners LLC for lobbyist services in the not-to-exceed amount of $70,000.
Second.
Councilmember Newsma moves item A21. Councilmember Reed seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I appreciate a number of the questions that some of my colleagues, Councilmember Braithwaite, had at the last meeting regarding this, and it seems that those have been answered. The one thing that I asked for and that I would still love to see written somewhere is a scope of work, and particularly some contract that would be engaged between the city and this firm. I know that we said that maybe it's a misnomer to call this person a lobbyist because, as was described by the city manager, they really wouldn't be lobbying. As the city manager describes, they do more connecting the city with existing resources or advocating, or I guess partial lobbying. But I'd really love to see, if this is a year contract, I'm sure this would be the first of a number of years, and who knows, the contract may grow over time. I'd really like a detailed report of what services were rendered for the $70,000. And I'd particularly like to see that if we're having folks, if we're paying a firm to lobby on behalf of the state, I spoke to at least one colleague, but I'd prefer to see this council approve the things that they're lobbying regarding. And I'd hate to see, a lobbyist on behalf of the residents of Evanston lobbying for something that is counter to the values of a majority of this council and, by extension, a majority of our community. None of those things were included, but Manager Ganderski, can you express how you will keep the council apprised of the work that you have asked? In the RFP, it says the city manager will be the person to direct the lobbying firm. Can you tell us how you plan to utilize the service?
Sure.
And how you keep the council apprised of what they're doing?
We generally enter into our professional services contract. I can work with Council Cummings on looking at the scope of that to ensuring, that this person is reflecting the values of the council and not necessarily advocating for something that the city didn't ask this person to advocate for. But in terms of keeping the council apprised, we can do quarterly reports, we can do semi-annual reports. Whatever the council is comfortable with, we can certainly provide that.
Yeah, I think semi-annual is fine. I mean, it's their first year. To me, that seems fine. I don't know if anyone else has a different opinion, but I just want to be clear of what the value add is for this.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you. My feelings about this is still the same. I wish we had spent more time talking about the need and to get a more global understanding of this position. I think we have 2 members of our city council, 1 member of our staff who have a significant amount of experience working downstate, and I just don't know for a new position like this. Again, I would agree with where is the value in it, particularly how it's going to benefit our taxpayer base. So the one thing that I couldn't figure out is this just a straight paid salary to an individual that we have not seen, met, will have an opportunity to interview, or is this treated as more of a contract where someone is billing us for an hourly rate based on what they're going to be doing that are specific to the city of Evanston, if that question makes sense. And I missed that while I was...
It's a professional services contract like any other that the city obtains that, I don't think it's customary for us to interview individual applicants. But as I understand it, the financial structure of the contract is a monthly retainer.
Okay. So they're billing us monthly basis. So it's not just one specific person dedicated, it's their whole firm? Is that what you're describing as a professional services contract? I don't know. I'm just asking.
I'm just as someone who sort of knows this world a little bit, that's how I think it ordinarily works. I would defer to our corporation counsel. I mean, I've never negotiated a professional services contract before. So if someone else wants to jump in, that's fine. But that's my understanding of how these things are ordinarily structured, so particularly in this field.
Good evening, members of City Council, City Manager, Interim City Manager Ken Yersti, Mayor Biss, and Clerk Mendoza, Nicholas Cummings, Corporation Counsel. 821 should have attached to it with the request for qualifications, it should have a sample in Exhibit J of the city's standard professional services agreement, which actually has as a standard paragraph the scope of services, which is usually an attachment that's included to the request for qualification, or it should be. Generally speaking, there is room for us to negotiate and add terms to the scope of services, so we can look at that in terms of reporting requirements and things like that that Councilmember Reed is raising. But those are all built into the professional services contract. Typically, our standard template for professional services includes a scope of services which are part built out in the request for qualifications.
So what page is it on, Nick?
I don't think there was a...
Okay, it wasn't attached then with the approval, but generally speaking, usually the RFQ. So I can see if it's still posted, because the city posts all of our requests for our bids on the website. So I can see if it's still up on the website, and I can point it out to you.
If I could use the rest of my time again, if we were hiring an attorney, I know what attorneys do. There would be a specific task, a specific case that they're doing. That would make sense. If it's a consulting, earlier we talked about a mechanical consultant who's going to look at it, HVAC. I wasn't in support of that either. So this is one of those things that it's not clear what we're allocating $70,000 for, given the fact that, we have people who have served downstate. So I think, I don't know what we're rushing into and the why, but for those that have an interest in it, it's just a matter of making it a little bit more clear to not only me, but also to the public. What are we truly investing in? So if it's someone, I heard last time it was someone who's going to pursue grants,
It's, so I'm looking at
Where should I, go ahead.
the memorandum that was attached to the agenda item. I have it on page 2, but I clicked the links, so I'm not sure.
403 and 404.
Thank you. So it says the contract lobbyists will be required to perform the following scope of services, and there's like 10 bullet points listed under there, which kind of defines what we're talking about. And then this particular bidder, their willingness to execute the city's PSA, the professional services agreement, was 15. They got a full score, which means they're not objecting to our normal professional services contract.
Yeah. I mean, if everybody else, I guess it'll come down to a vote, but I'm looking at this and this is going out on a ledge, if you're asking me, in terms of $70,000 for dedicated services that could very well, I would hope, be managed within our various departments, but I'm just one vote.
Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think the second bullet point says it all, which is research, prepare, and lobby proposals desired by the city. And so I think if there's something, the question for I think this body is whether or not we feel there's any use for this position. I can think of several. I had a call a few months ago where, Councilmember Reed, a state representative, reached out to him. Hey, we have some lead pipe money, but I need to know if you're interested. And he was able to get those funds. And so my next question was, well, what about for the Fifth Ward? Because nobody reached out to me, and I'm not saying anybody's at fault for that. It's a busy place. There's a lot happening at once. But that's just one example of, I think, the role that I would want this position to play, to make sure we're not missing opportunities to do things like lead pipe replacement, especially when we just heard earlier from Dave Stoneback that we need to find both state and federal funds to do that infrastructure improvement or infrastructure work. And if we don't find the funds, right, it's going to fall on us as a city. So I think it's up to us. I think between now and whenever they start, we should talk to the city manager and just say, look, this is what we would like to see. This is the work we would like to see them do. But again, to reiterate, the second bullet point says it all. And then the first bullet point does too, work under the direction of the city manager. So if we communicate to the city manager what we would like to see researched, prepared, and lobbied on our behalf, I think we should be able to work it out.
Point.
Yeah, next will be Councilmember Newsmith. I do want to echo what Councilmember Newsmith said earlier. Just by coincidence, this moment arose with Ann Rainey talking about the upcoming need to apply for funding given out by the Department of Mental Health. It is very clear to me that we are right now leaving money on the table. And I don't think anybody who looks at our budget would argue that we can afford to do that. Rectifying that problem is what this position is for. Councilmember Newsma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to make the same point, and to me, it's bullet point number 3, where we're really getting our value here. Position in the city to maximize state and federal funding opportunities. Case in point, funding for our mental health living room, or lead pipe replacement, or any number of different opportunities where money is available if someone knows where to look and knows what questions to ask. And that's what we're paying for with the $70,000, is to have somebody who knows who to ask the right questions. And I have full confidence that the $70,000 will pay for itself. One question with regards to the scope of work is this, are we paying only for state level relationships here? Because the second to last bullet point specifies intergovernmental relations, because that could also be county, could also be other municipalities.
Yeah, and critically, other non-municipality layers of government. Like one important example would be the transit agencies, or the Water Reclamation District, or the Cook County Forest Preserve, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I'm in support.
No one else who hasn't spoken yet is requesting to speak, so we'll go back to Councilmember Reed, who has 2.5 minutes left.
Thank you. All of the things that are being said are wonderful. I, of course, want us to have the capacity to look for all kinds of funds from the state to the federal. If there's money in Venezuela that we can get, I'm looking for us to take it. But I just want to see that it's very clear what, one, this firm is going to do, and then two, I, for example, recently wanted to decriminalize certain narcotics here in the city and move toward a more restorative model. We found out that at the state level, that is, you can't regulate, that a municipality can't regulate felonies. Can I go to the city manager and say, hey, city manager, I'd like this lobbyist to talk to the state about changing the home rule authority of a municipality about regulating drug crime in the city? And is that something that would be taken up? Or what is the process if one council member has something that they want to lobby at the state level? How do we move that forward? And if that isn't the case, where if there isn't a clear process for that, one, I think we should develop a process for that, or just be very clear in the policy that they're only looking for funding and they're not really a lobbyist. They are just a consultant that helps us, that does like searches for grants.
Councilmember Suffredin?
Sure. I'll answer that question. So I think the example that you just gave, that would be something that we would take up with the Municipal League, who lobbies on behalf of all municipal governments, including us. This position would be something that would be Evanston specific, and it's a position that has been in the city structure in the past as an in-house person. So what we're doing is replacing what existed before when Max Winkowski was here and did this job as a City of Evanston employee with an outside professional services contract. So your example about changing the law so that municipalities can decriminalize certain drugs, that would be a municipal league issue. The City of Evanston would be interested in things that affect specifically the City of Evanston, largely as it pertains to funding and grants. So that's what is being asked for here. I think, from your example, like we already have an organization we belong to that you could reach out to for assistance with that.
If I can just point of information on that is that, for example, Evanston is the only city in the state that has dissolved our township. When we went to the state to ask to change the law around township, that wasn't a Illinois Municipal League thing, because I still think to this date, I don't think another city has followed suit. So there are changes that could be made at the state level that we only care about. And for example, we could be the only city that really cares about the drug policy, and that's the thing that we'd like to see changed. And the Illinois Municipal League, representing cities across the state, wouldn't be interested in that.
Okay. I mean, if you want to talk about the townships, I think we have someone up here who's got more expertise on that.
Sure. So I can think of two examples of legislation I worked on that was, it was a bill like any other bill, but it was highly Evanston specific. The one was the township dissolution legislation, and the other was something to get rid of a limitation in the law that was making it hard for fused spirits to grow. So those were specific items where I and my legislative office and the mayor and Matt Swinkowski worked together to figure out a strategy to pass a law. In those instances, I was called upon to do so by the city at large. In the case of fused spirits, there was clarity that there was agreement, there was no potential dissent. And in the case of the township, the city ran an advisory referendum first to show me there was the support. I would imagine that if a single council member went to the city manager in this circumstance and said, hey, go work on this thing, the decision tree would be, is this something that we know the whole community is for? If so, go ahead. And if not, let's bring it to council. And when I'm looking at the items on the list or the things that we're talking about, I don't think we're talking about things that live anywhere close to a gray area of, is there actually community support for it? I think we're talking about things that are very, very obviously well within the transparent interests of the city of Evanston. And if that's not the case, then you don't hire someone from the outside to do it.
Oh, I'm sorry. What list are you referring to?
The bullets that describe the scope of work.
Okay, so you're referring to like capturing funding. So again, I just don't want to see, for example, if there's some grant out there to buy more military-style weapons for our police department, which, I mean, we can make faces, but that exists out there.
Never done it.
I don't want a lobbyist paid by the city of Evanston searching for those funds, nor advocating for some other policy. And it may seem, and I know that's not the greatest example because that I think would be clearly against the values of Evanston, but I just want to have a clear accounting of what we're spending taxpayer dollars on to advocate to other levels of government. And if Few Spirits, great. I in fact, for the first time, bought something from Few, great company, glad they're in Evanston. But does the municipality, if those are the two examples you have, does that warrant a contract for a private business to help change the state law to expand their private business?
Yes. So your time has expired. Next is Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't take very long. I think those two examples were excellent ones. Few Spirits, which is in the 3rd Ward and is owned and the brainchild of a 3rd Ward resident, Paul Letko, required really careful, targeted legislation in Springfield to achieve that goal. We all now see it as, oh, of course, what a good idea. But at the time, it was not clear at all that was going to be able to pass, even with Mayor Biss's expertise there. I mean, it required a lot of work. I mean, Few Spirits is now sold all over the world. It's put Evanston on the map for fine spirits. I was here before Matt Swinkowski, who we've all talked about, was our intergovernmental affairs officer, and then after he left, he made an enormous difference. Having someone in that position made an enormous difference. I mean, on one of these, one of the first bullet points, acting as a liaison with other governmental agencies. Evanston was behaving like this completely separate island for the longest time here, and we all tend to sort of live on that island and not think very much outwardly. When we got an intergovernmental affairs officer, all of a sudden we were able to reach out and have regular contacts with all of the transportation agencies, the IEPA, all of these other agencies, and Matt was our go-to person. He had a relationship with people in all of these places, whereas before that, Dave Stoneback will tell you, you call to CTA or one of the other agencies, 1 month you'd finally get someone, the next month you call to follow up. They had never heard of the person that you had talked to before. I mean, that was a really common occurrence. We got nowhere with those agencies. We need this type of person whose job is dedicated to projecting our interests out into the world and bringing back to us the benefits of having our presence projected out. So I think this is a very, very good essential position to have. If we don't feel that this is the right group, at some point we can change it to something else. But I think almost any municipality would have this as a regular. I don't think you're functioning well as a municipality unless you have this function in there, have someone doing this job. So I'm very much in support.
So no one who has not yet spoken is requesting to speak. So now we'll move to Councilmember Braithwaite, who has 2 minutes and 20 seconds left.
So it's more of a question and a request to expand. I remember Matt's position well, and I don't, on the first bullet point, it refers to state elected officials, which that's my concern. Government.
Officials, not elected.
Okay. So I'm more used to using the example CTA, RTA. I think Matt was good with IPA. I think Matt was also good with ComEd and NICOR. Like those, I would want to see that written in with that understanding that that person would be able to do those conversations. That's more instrumental to me, I think, on behalf of the residents that I serve versus what I'm understanding now in terms of grants. So if that's going to be included, I want to make sure that that is obviously a part of the conversation to the city manager. And then the last thing is, I know we get regular reports on our monthly legal expenses, and I think this would be one of those things that we would want to see if there's enough votes passing. What the hell are these people, what are this agency doing on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, to assess the value?
That brings us to Councilmember Burns, who has 3 minutes and 25 seconds left.
Just to try to capture some of Councilmember Reed's concerns too. So it says it's one of the bullet points draft legislation in support of the city's legislative priorities. So again, I think the question is, what is the process for a council member to submit a proposal idea, which I don't know if we've defined that process, but we certainly should. I agree with Councilmember Reed that we should determine what that process is. I've brought this up before, and I'll be making a referral soon that I think we should develop annual work plans, and this would fit nicely into that. We can just add this as one of the things that we consider when developing an annual work plan, because then after that, we can make sure all of our boards, committees, and commissions, as well as our lobbyists, in this case, will align to that work plan. And so it'll be a clear process to determine how we move forward as a city. But I guess the question to the city manager is just, to that second bullet point, research, prepare, and lobby proposals desired by the city. Will we be able to express to you, hey, here's what we desire for this position to do, and you can come back to us and say, all right, I've collated all of that, and here's what seems to be the top interest of the council, and so we'll pursue that, or what's the best way to?
Yeah, I think like you all have been doing when you have policy consideration, you make a referral. Sometimes you don't even get that far. You work with Allison to research policy implications behind a concept or an idea. I think if it's something that's going to require a policy change fundamentally for the city, I think it should go through the referrals committee and then come to a committee first. If it's something that the council as a whole wants to see change on a larger scale, then I think it should come through that way.
And to be clear, I'm more so talking about the fundraising effort. So I do think it makes, unless we just want to send them, we really could have them make sure they look at everything. But to say, okay, these are our top 5 priorities, lead pipe replacement program. I don't know, Councilmember Reed, if you had an idea, I think Councilmember Braithwaite might have had one, but just so we know, like, these are our top 3 to 4 priorities that we want you to report back on during the first check-in to say, okay, what's out there?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. How can the council communicate what those priorities are? And
just email me and let me know.
Okay.
I have one
So
last.
your time is up, Councilmember.
I have one quick question. I maybe
Your
want to
time
make
is
a
up.
motion.
What's that? Your
want to make a motion?
Yeah.
your time is up, Councilmember.
Well, I'll follow the tradition and just speak because we've let that happen. I am curious, what is the amount of money that, how much time do we get per month? If this is a $70,000 contract and you said it's billed monthly, what does that translate to in hours per month that they're doing work for us?
Rate.
Yeah, the hourly rate. So
Yeah.
if
What's
we're,
their hourly rate?
how many hours are we getting per month?
I mean, that's not how this works. I can tell you that straight up.
That's what she said. There's a monthly retainer that
It's
we're
a
paying.
retainer.
We bill against the retainer, presumably.
Oh, what is the hourly rate?
No,
Okay.
we don't bill against the retainer. There's no hourly rate. We pay monthly for the services, which, by the way, doubtless will vary dramatically from month to month.
So it's unlimited services for
I think that's a fair question.
It's a fine question. The contract is described here. I have no further information. I'm advocating that we do this because I think it's a really, really important thing for the city, and I think we're hurting ourselves by not doing it. I'm not an expert in the contract negotiation. I'm not an attorney. In my experience, this type of contract is always handled as a monthly retainer. Has dramatic ebb and flow as the various circumstances and the various layers of government that are relevant to the work ebb and flow, which is just how it works. As budget cycles move, as capital bills move, that's how this sort of thing works. And in my day job, I'm a consultant with a monthly retainer, and I work a really different number of months, different months. That's just how it goes. Seeing no one else seeking recognition, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
No.
Councilmember Heracariz?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
No.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
So with 4 members in favor and 3 voting against, item A21 passes. I recognize that a 4-vote passage is unusual, but just for the record, Councilmember Nguyen is in the restroom and is also a supporter, so there's a 5th vote in the building. But since this is not an ordinance, a vote of 4 to 3 is enough to pass it, and therefore item A21 is passed.
Is that the case with financial items?
Mr. Cummings?
I can look at it really quickly, but my understanding is that only an ordinance requires 5 according to city council rules.
And if there's a concern, why don't you take a minute? We can stand at ease. You can take a minute to look it over. It seems possible the issue will become moot during the course of that research.
And no matter where this goes, please, the council members who have a concern with this, submit your ideas, please, to the city manager, so that this can be so that your opinions become productive, even if this does not pass. What do you want the lobbyists to work on? Let's discuss it and get that done. This is not, I think we're overcomplicating this. It is up to us to prioritize the work of the lobbyists. Let's submit those priorities and get them to work.
Councilmember Nguyen, we're waiting on your vote for A21.
With 5 voting in favor and 3 voting against, item A21 passes. This now brings us to item P2. Is there a motion on item P2?
I move approval of item P2, ordinance 18022, approving a major variation pursuant to City Code 63810D for the property located at 1706 through 1710 Sherman Avenue.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Reed moves item P2. Councilmember Newsma seconds. Is there any discussion? We begin with Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. Yeah, I support this project. However, I would like to hold it this evening because we have, I've been discussing this with staff. We need to review the loading zone as well, because it's a tight space, and at this point there's no place. We just have to figure that piece out. As well, the owner and the developer would like a greater variance on the parking, so I'd also like to see if we can accommodate those wishes in reducing the number of required parking spaces. So I'm asking that this be held till the April 23rd meeting so that staff they've said they need that time to effectively review the loading situation at this property.
So let me make a procedural question. A hold is to the next meeting, which is sometime in...
Okay, I can't hold it till the 23rd.
You could table it to a date certain and pick that date.
Okay, then I'll table it to April 23rd.
So Councilmember Kelly moves to table ordinance 18-0-22 until the April 23rd City Council meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Braithwaite seconds. Is there any discussion on the councilmember's motion to table?
Motion to table is not debatable, Mayor.
There's no discussion on the motion to table. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
I believe motion table is debate. Aye.
Councilmember Heracariz?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn?
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion to table passes, and this item will be on the April 23rd City Council agenda. This brings us to call of the wards. Councilmember Burns.
The next Fifth Ward meeting is this Thursday at 7 p.m. and it will be a virtual Fifth Ward meeting. Topics for discussion: introducing the Oakton Emory Williams Academy for Black Men, a cohort-style educational academy of Oakton College recruits. Guest speakers: Dr. Ruben Howard, Director of Workforce Development and Community Partnerships, and Mario Botha, Endowed Chair for the Oakton Academy for Black Men. We'll also hear from Councilmember Reed. Will provide a presentation on participatory budgeting, a democratic process in which community members directly decide how to spend part of a public budget. And lastly, an update on design concepts for the new permanent skate park in Twiggs Park. Guest speakers: Laura Biggs, Capital Planning and Engineering Bureau Chief, and Stephanie Levine, Senior Project Manager for the City of Evanston. That is all. Thank you.
Before we go on, I just want to correct an error that just occurred. The motion to table was for April 25th. I believe I said April 23rd. My apologies. So the item that was P2 will be on the April 25th City Council agenda this year. Councilmember Reed.
I also want to announce a ward meeting for the same date as for this Thursday, the last Thursday of every month. It is at 6 p.m. via Google Meet, and so residents can join in. That is listed on the city's website. I also I've made this I've mentioned this to the city manager and to a number of folks. Given some of the events recently, I think it's appropriate for the city of Evanston to step up our game a bit for our global neighbors, and I would love to see us create, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago, a fund for folks who are, of course, not only victims of what's going on in Ukraine, but global victims of democratic destabilization. I'd love to see us set up a fund of $50,000 to $75,000 to help folks relocate here in Evanston. I spoke with Manager Gandersky a few weeks ago. I spoke with Allison a few weeks ago as well, and a number of my colleagues. And so I don't know if the proper thing is to make a motion for a special order of business, or if we can just agree that in the coming weeks that we'll have on the agenda an item that would create at least an initial fund for this year, and then we can certainly have a longer discussion about funding that annually. But I think it's important and prescient now that we would take that step to help our global neighbors. So I guess I don't know if I can, either I should make a motion, or Mayor Biss, do I have your commitment to have that on an agenda? I think Manager Gandersky assured that $50,000 is something we could find.
This is kind of being dropped on me a little abruptly. My instinct is that it should go through a committee and be handled in that way. But if you want to make a motion to create a special order of business, you can.
My only reason for it's not a policy change unless it's done annually. It would be a fairly small expenditure. So I guess I'll make a motion to place a special order of business. I'll put it a few weeks out to give staff time, but I have been mentioning this both here from this dais a few weeks ago, and I have spoken to Kelly and Alice, and it's almost a rounding error in the grand scheme of things, but for families who have been suffering from what's going on across the world, not just in Europe, it would mean a big difference for folks who are relocating here and maybe have nothing, particularly given that Kiev is our sister city. So I will move that at the meeting on the 25th of April, that we place on the agenda a motion to allocate, I'll go big and we can put it down, and $75,000 for refugee resettlement.
Councilmember Reed moves to place a special order of business on the April 25th agenda to create a $75,000 expenditure for refugee resettlement. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Hadakaris seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
No.
Councilmember Wen?
No.
Councilmember Newsma?
No.
With 3 voting in favor and 4 voting against, the motion fails.
Remember when they come for us.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Kelly.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick recap from our earlier special order of business. Just want to acknowledge when they have an opportunity, Evanston's own $9,000 commitment, especially during COVID. Those dollars are raised from the community to support the Mayor's Summer Youth Program. And then congratulations to the to Mr. Bill Logan, as well as his family. There are a number of events, as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, that are planned over the next couple of months to celebrate his 90th birthday, and I'll continue to keep the council informed of that. Thank you.
Councilmember Wen.
Yes, I want to invite everyone to the next Third Ward in-person office hours, which will be the first Thursday in April. And my apologies, April 7th. But it's office hours. Right, so thank you very much. It'll be the other end of the day, 7:30 to 10 a.m. at Brothers K. Looking forward to seeing you.
Sorry, Councilmember Newsma.
I would like to announce that my regularly scheduled ward meeting for the first Tuesday, which would be April 5th, is going to be rescheduled tentatively to Wednesday the 13th. Stay tuned for confirmation. Regularly scheduled office hours will happen as usual Saturday the 9th at Capitol, 10 to noon.
And seeing nothing further to come before us, the March 28th meeting of the Evanston City Council stands adjourned.